Hi, this is Narwhal Prime, and I'll be doing commentary on a run I did for the game Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. So a little background, I've been playing this game for about 4 years, started speedrunning it seriously about 2 years ago. This game has been previously run by me at Calathon in 2018. It's a pretty smooth run with pretty good success. I encourage you to check it out after this submission. Also, I did attempt to submit this game in 2017 SGDQ, and I'm going for it again. One last important note is I am currently second place by only a few seconds off from the world record holder. So with that all out of the way, I'd like to explain how this game works, just as an intro. So this game is intended as a communication exercise between 2 or more players, where one player is the diffuser, who has access to the screen and the mouse with which to control and manipulate the bomb. But they don't have the instructions on how to defuse it. The other players are the experts, who have copies of the manual that can be found online by the developers, Steel Crate Games, on their website. And their goal is to relay information on how to defuse the bomb to the expert. So it becomes a communication exercise because the expert must say what they see on the bomb, what color wires or buttons they see, and based on that, there are instructions on how to defuse, which the experts must communicate back. So that's how the game is normally played. But the main point, the main spectacle of the speedrun, particularly any percent solo, is not only do I take on the runner not only takes on the role of both the diffuser and the expert, but must also, typically, it isn't. I will say that the manual is not forbidden to use the manual during runs, but it becomes apparent that reading the manual does take time. So for speedrunning purposes, it's practical to actually memorize the entire manual, which is what some of the higher end runners typically do, and that's what I'll be doing in my runs. So now we've established we're running the game the abnormal way. How does the speedrunning exactly work? So currently there are several categories on the speedrun.com site. The main one at the moment would be the any percent with no early detonation, and I'll go and explain what that is a bit. But there's also another category you'll see on that site for a subset of the levels, as it would be. But really, any percent is the one we're going for here. Now, a little history is a long time ago, you were allowed to detonate the bomb early if you've seen that all the modules are diffused. So as you've seen in this video so far, when a module has been solved, the LED will light up green. When all the LEDs are green, you're actually, to save you some menuing time and displaying of how long it took, you could actually detonate the bomb intentionally right then and there. So it looked like it would be a failure on the UI, but we'd count that as solved. In this any percent run, which I'm demonstrating in this video, this is following the more modern any percent rules, which is there's no early detonation. So you just have to wait for the little victory chime, which you can't really hear right now. That will be played on the completion of each bomb. But it makes it easier to track the progress and allows you to play the game from a fresh save file, because not all the bombs will be available to you from the start on a fresh save. So I'll get into expected time losses and sinks in a bit. I'd like to address the video in front of me, since this is enough background, I suppose, about the game itself. So the game consists of, I do apologize, I believe it's 26 or 32 levels. It serves me right to do fact checking now. But the idea is to progress through the bombs one after another. Once you solve one, you go into the next. Let's talk a bit about some of the modules we see here. I might skip over a couple of them, like you might see some buttons or knobs of some sort. I'll talk about a few of my favorites. This one coming up here would be the maze, which you'll see is a 6x6 grid of symbols. So one of the things that requires memorization is the various mazes. The red triangle would indicate the exit, and the white dot indicates the current position. And the idea is to identify which maze it is based on the green circles. That indicates one of the 9 possible mazes. And from there, you'll have to remember where the hidden walls are and traverse to the exit without hitting any walls. Oh yeah, and the way to detonate, by the way, is some bombs, especially the earlier ones, you're allowed to make 3 mistakes, or 2 mistakes. On the third one, the bomb will actually detonate. So when you detonate a bomb in the runs, you just reset the bomb. There'll be a menu saying, you failed, please try again. There's a retry button. Yeah, so the maze, we discussed that. That one is probably more interesting, harder modules to memorize due to the sheer amount of spatial memory required. But it's definitely one of the more interesting ones. A few other things to may note while I'm waiting for this other bomb to show up is sometimes you'll see me trying to solve the bomb basically when it's in the dark. If you turn up, maybe it's kind of hard to see through the YouTube video, but if you turn up your gamma settings high enough on the screen, you could actually see some details. So that allows you to progress the bombs faster. That said, not every bomb can be done in the dark this way. These buttons here, there's an interesting timing associated with them. Essentially, for the most part, you press and hold the button, and then there'll be a little colored strip, and the instructions say, oh, release the button when there's a certain digit in a timer, depending on what color the strip is. Oh, if it's blue, wait till there's a 4, and stuff like that. So actually, while the color strip is random, you usually try to time the timer such that all the relevant digits may show up at once. In this case, 145. So you might wait until a particular time to trigger that button, so that way you can progress through the other modules faster. Some modules require memory, the one with the 4 buttons and this little screen. So yeah, the one on the bottom right is the memory module. There's a series of instructions at each step, like, oh, if you see a 4, press this button and stuff. But depending on which stage you're on in that memory, the stage, by those green lights there, you'll see basically those 5 lights indicate 5 stages. You actually have to refer to the previous buttons you pressed. So it becomes quite a challenge when you have to jump between different modules on the bomb and then have to remember, which button did I press in which stage. So that presents itself a challenge, especially for speedrunning, especially when we're going too fast. Some other modules, like the horizontal wires, are more straightforward. You just click one of the wires and you're pretty much done. What else? Going through my list of the modules here. Ah, yes. That's a wire sequence one with the blue, white, and blue, red, and black wires. Also features a memory component. Without going too much into details, you essentially have to memorize how many wires of each color you have snipped so far in that module alone. So the interesting part of the speedrunning for this game would be how one would save time. You'll notice that in this memory module, when I click a button, there's actually a little delay before the next one shows up. And depending on how I manage the other modules, like I may click one of the buttons in the memory module, then move on to an easier one, and then return to the memory within the span of those 2 or 3 seconds. There's definitely RNG involved with maybe some patterns are easier or take fewer steps to complete. But for the most part, given the sheer amount of modules one encounters during an average speedrun, it generally averages out. This is a perfect run shown in this video. Spoilers. But I will say, one possible risk is, of course, having to restart a particular bomb. And granted, that does happen, especially on bombs where you're only guaranteed, there's some bombs that are known as hardcore, where you cannot make a single mistake, or else you have to restart that bomb. Depending on how early on you mess up, it might take like 8 seconds, because that's the duration for the whole animation sequence to happen. And if you're near the end and you're a little more unfortunate, you might make a mistake near the end. That might cost a minute, or generally around a minute, worst case a minute and a half, depending on how slowly you progress through the other modules. But that's one I'll take into account. Generally pretty consistent, especially since, like, for the most part, it's very little probability that a weird case happens. Let's see. So the one that just completed was called Who's on First. The one was the 6 words in a grid and like a 7th word in the display above. That was probably the most interesting. And also, not only does it require a sheer amount of basically arbitrary information to be memorized, but during my runs, even when I was practicing, I'd say my mnemonics for that particular module out loud. It's been described by onlookers and one of my friends as basically just a stream of rambling that they find interesting to hear. I might actually, there's actually one bomb that will feature just that module. I'll probably explain that when that happens. But real quick, the way that works is the gimmick of that module is it features words that sound similar, like your and your being like Y-O-U-R, the possessive, and your, the contraction, like Y-O-U apostrophe R-E. And there might be different instructions based on, which word is which. In the multiplayer version rather, that can lead to an interesting miscommunication. And, great fun for everyone involved, right? So, well, we'll get to that in a moment. Coming to chapter 5 soon of these modules. Yeah, these levels are just grouped pretty much into these chapters, where they introduce new kinds of modules in each chapter, and new combinations of challenges. So chapter 4 introduced the idea of needy modules, which, just to further grab the player's attention, they don't necessarily get solved. Rather, all the other modules have to be solved, apart from needies, in order to complete the bomb. But if the needy doesn't get attended to from time to time, or you make a wrong response to it, you would actually detonate the bomb early. And we don't want that. I'll actually make a clarification here about detonation versus these strikes, which you might have seen a little red flash earlier and a little red X. Some bombs, so as I said, some bombs do have a one mistake and you restart. The earlier bombs have 3 strikes and you're out, where you're allowed to get 2 X's or 2 mistakes. And I did get one in that one, the previous bomb, but everything was fine. And actually in the earlier bombs, going back to the timer and the button where you have to release on a certain digit, getting a strike actually increases the timer speed. So it actually goes faster than 1 tick per second. So actually you can get to a time faster, or a desired digit faster, by intentionally getting strikes early. A slightly riskier strategy, but if you're going for the world records, it can definitely help. Apart from RNG, of course. So, coming to this password module, which you have to get a certain word. That was probably not as interesting. Anyway, let's get to the Who's on First module. All right. A lot of menuing in sort of navigating between levels, which is part of the speedrun. Okay, so the mnemonics that go in my head when I'm looking at this is like, okay, letter C is, okay, I look at top right, press is right middle, yes, right. Okay, so it's ready. LED, I'm going faster than current to me is thinking right now, actually. So the way this works is there's essentially lists and lists of words involved. You look at the display in the word in the display, like I see red, R-E-D, that corresponds to one of the 6 positions of that grid. You look at the word in that target position. So if I see the word display, I look at the bottom right. That word was the word next. Okay, so the second step is, okay, among those labels in the grid, there are 28 possible words. Each word corresponds to a list of more words. And this is all explained in the expert's manual. But I'm just giving you an overview that you essentially have to memorize each of those lists of words. You click the first word that appears in that list. I guess I'll explain a little bit of okay, this is a lot of arbitrary info. How does a human memorize all this? And this is what I do explain in my Calathon run, and I do plan on explaining here as well. So essentially, I have mnemonic techniques. And in this particular case, I compress all the words, the lists, into letters, and then combine the letters into interesting, acronyms or other words or stuff like that. So you have 28 lists. Well, there's, let me think. Yeah, 28 lists, also 28 possible words. I mapped each of the words to a letter in the English alphabet. Now, there are 26 letters. The last 2 are I mapped to a question mark and exclamation mark. It's right arbitrary. But then that way, you essentially convert these lists into very compact sized, maybe gibberish words, or maybe you can find some acronyms among them. But it definitely makes the memorization more convenient. And then it's just a matter of practice, practice, practice. Honestly, with the bomb, like the who's on that was full of the who's on first modules, it's actually makes for a very good practice. Just do that bomb over and over again. We're coming up to an interesting bomb here, which has speaking of practice, has one of every non-needy module in the game. So actually, this also serves for a good practice. Just make sure you got every one of the modules down, and then do the bomb over and over again, just so you got all the different combinations and perhaps weird edge cases also. Let's see. Yeah. Also a note about the lists of words and who's on first. Some lists are shorter since the word, well, without going into too much detail, there is a way to cut off each of the lists to be shorter than they actually are. So you might see, if you go look up the manual online, you'll see oh my gosh, there's a dozen words in each list. How do you memorize 28 times 12 words? Yeah, but in practice, you only need to memorize the first 9 is what we've found. And second of all, as mentioned, I don't want to go into too much detail, but you can actually truncate some of the lists. So it's not too bad. But it does make for a very interesting spectacle. Okay. I guess we'll come to it soon in this chapter 6 bombs. There is one module that, so I said who's on first is my favorite. One of these modules is actually my least. It's not shown up here. These vertical wires are a little more straightforward. You click on one or more of those wires based on the positions of certain, or the existence of certain batteries, or what the serial number is on the bomb itself. So that's actually a case where I examine the BOM ahead of time when the room is dark, because it's not really easy to see all the details. Actually, it's not possible to see all the details of the vertical wires when the room is dark. It's coming up. So for reference, this is the second to last chapter. Okay. So the Simon Says module is a particular annoyance and is a true sense of just pure RNG in this game. It works kind of similar to an actual Simon Says toy, but instead of repeating the sequence of lights that flashes, based on how many strikes you have and the serial number on the bomb, you actually have to choose. There's actually a one-to-one mapping to a different color sometimes. For example, if you have an even serial number, you have no strikes, and red flashes, you actually press blue. Otherwise, it works similar to the memorization game. The problem in this game, however, excuse me, is there's no way to control the length of the final sequence. Like you may get you start with one color and then two colors and then three, but you may go on to four or you may go on to five. The time difference between them can be quite stark, especially if you're balancing between different modules and parallel processing, as it were. You might see some of that frantic back and forth in some of the later bombs. I might have definitely already done it in this run so far, but I haven't been paying too much attention, admittedly. Let's see. So this one here is the Morse code. Fairly straightforward. It does require learning Morse code, but hey, this game is educational. It does force you to learn Morse code, as well as the list of words associated with a certain radio frequency. That's the list they put in the manual. You just have to tune the radio to the right frequency and you've solved that module. So, kind of arbitrary. That's the needy knobs. So that's the one where you have to attend to periodically. Usually I skip the needies, especially on the early needy bombs. Obviously because you're going fast enough that you don't have to worry about them. But in this case, there is enough stuff on the bomb that requires attending the needy modules. We're going on to the I Am Hardcore. Possibly the last chapter features basically weird distributions of modules. This is the last bomb that is the most difficult bomb. So has like a healthy distribution of all sorts of modules. Maybe not like the one with everything. It's always got one needy module and relatively random distribution of other modules. You may have some duplicates, but that's what you get at random events, I guess. But being able to do this bomb consistently is a good sign that you are ready to do the whole game without the manual. See, other modules haven't been covered. The bottom middle one is symbols. And it's pretty straightforward and kind of fun. It's one of the more beginner modules. Essentially, I have to press the symbols in order based on a series of lists of symbols that they give you. That's another needy module up there. If it says vent gas, you say yes. If it says detonate, say no. Pretty obvious what happens for the detonate case. Let's see. I guess since we're still here, I do have some talking points about possible incentives. So in the Calathon run, I'll probably put this in the description as well. Actually, sorry, let's back it up a bit before we get to what we did in Calathon. This game features a lot of use of the features Steam Workshop, which allows people to make all sorts of custom modules and maybe different settings and whatnot. So that's actually a little like a fun scene where people try to come up with all sorts of wacky modules and challenge each other to, go beyond what the game offers. By the way, what's on the screen right now is demonstrating parallelizing between different assignment sets. So you'll see that a lot in these runs. Anyway, one mod in particular is not another module, but rather a cosmetic addition where we add the Rick Astley is never going to give you up at random times in the game. You'll see on the background there's actually an alarm clock, and it doesn't show up in this run because I've muted the audio, but it will randomly beep, presumably to be similar to a bomb exploding, which is supposed to frighten the experts or whatever. But what we've done in that run is replace the audio with a short snippet of Never Gonna Give You Up, and essentially rickroll the entire stream and attendees. And that was pretty fun. A lot of sour please in the chat. That was the day I learned that Twitch emote. Or rather, the day when I saw the recording. So, anyway, one incentive could be, what do we want to show up? Or really, any kind of cosmetic mod that we could use within reason. I think the easiest one could be some sort of soundbite. Like there's also like "oh no" sound effect for strikes. I don't know if that will go down as well, but that's just an example. I'm sure we can come up with a list of interesting mods to use. Another possible incentive, as mentioned, there are those custom modules. We could feature those and perhaps do like an actual 2-player live session with these custom modules. There is actually a separate community for doing custom modules to go beyond the base game. So we'll see how that goes. So far we've been still in the show. We've been showing chapter 7 here, which, as mentioned, features, when I say skewed distribution of modules, I mean most of them are pretty much the same module, which also makes for a very good practice. The first time you're doing these, this was especially helpful for Maze. There are also mods that allow you to, do these modules without penalty, because normally this is a hardcore bomb, so one strike and you're out. Thankfully with the mods, I do apologize, I can't remember which one specifically, but I do know they allow you to practice certain modules over and over until you get them down right. So very, very amenable for speedrun practice. Yeah. I think that pretty much covers it. So anyway, I'll let the rest of this video run. It's nearing the end. So anyway, I'd like to thank you, wherever you are, for taking the time to review my submission. And, well, best luck to everyone, and hope to see you around. So long.